Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charnley. This is another historic church in Nottinghamshire. This is St Mary's, Staunton in the Vale. There was a church here in Norman times, and the font survives from that. It seems to be much rebuilt in the 14th century, and then in the mid-19th century it's restored to its current glory. It's closely associated with the Staunton family of Staunton Hall next door. The ancient manor house and the church have long stood side by side. It therefore very much has the feel of a country house church with box pews and family memorials. It is one of the more beautiful of these Nottinghamshire churches, and as I began today's jaunt with Langar, which is restored at a similar time, so we end in a similar building. This is not cruciform, it's big and long and has a whacking great north aisle that's known as the St Lawrence Choir, and then unusually the tower is offset on the north side. So we'll have a look around. As usual, then we begin at the west end, at the back of the church. You can see, looking east, we have the Staunton family funerary hatchments along the wall there, and since we are just before Christmas, there's a Christmas tree there. And the pews with doors, they're a very late incarnation of the infamous box pews. Turn around here, there's the organ, nice pipe organ, and unusually its predecessor is still here. And this is a type of organ that fascinates me for various reasons. There it is, this is the barrel organ. Now a barrel organ is a type of mechanical instrument. It doesn't have a keyboard, but rather it's played, and it is a pipe organ, but it is played by turning a handle or otherwise rotating a wooden cylinder on which there are staples that actuate the various pipes of the organ and various notes, and basically it plays itself. They were quite popular, but Victorians didn't like them, and of course they get replaced by organs that a person can play. Here is the Norman font. Very fine, and in the St Lawrence aisle we have the memorials. Here we have memorial to Job Staunton Charlton, Esquire, and he was the son of Gilbert Charlton, and his wife, his mother rather, was the eldest daughter of Harvey Staunton, of course, Staunton here, the famous family who go back to before the Norman Conquest in this place. And of course they have their memorials here now. I'm not sure who all of them are, in fact I'm not sure many of them are, but we can see here the Staunton Memorial. Sorry about that, we have a problem with something. We have here this knight in chain. Oh well, his chainmail is sculpted. Here is a rather unfortunate torso, probably another knight, but hard to tell. And we have a lady here. They've all been bashed about a bit, sadly. And here we have, just look at this fellow, here's another knight, but he is largely, in his coffin, you can see there's his head in his coffin, and then, I get some water come through no, just some shadows, that's good then. And there's his feet sticking out, and he's got his shield on top of him there. So that's rather nice. And looking west, this is the St Lawrence aisle, which obviously you can see is used primarily for burials. Old bench, another Staunton memorial below. So we move around. Now this is the back end of the pipe organ, not as the barrel organ. And that there's a panel there you could take out, and you can change your barrels over, and your barrels would have a number of tunes on them, and there's a selector you could use to select which tune you wanted. So all very, very clever. And back up the nave, and the pews, of course. The Staunton family pew at the front, as it ought to be, and there it is. And the heating, a nice big old stove. You see the radiator fins to throw off heat better. Pulpit and Degg, Harvey Degg, also Staunton, a relative. The screen is medieval, late 14th, maybe 15th century, but through the medieval screen, and obviously there was a big rebuilding scheme back then. Little of it has survived. And into the chancel, which is a nice peaceful space. You can see here we've got these oil lamps, and they are still oil lamps. It must be very, very nice on a winter's evening, Christmas carol service. There's the altar, and these memorial of the Stauntons of Staunton Hall. I think are still there. I hope so. These big houses, given they've been there since before the Norman Conquest. I mean, Piscina, which is a Victorian one. Here is Anne, widow of the Honourable Colonel William Staunton. Because absolutely. And there we are, looking west, and tower out there. But it is, I think, probably sunset out there now. So we shall have to have a look around before the light completely disappears, and we find ourselves in the dark. But proceeding down here, just stopping off to turn off the lights in the chancel, because there we are. And you see there the organ at the west end. Nice big case, so that it's suitably impressive for this particular building, because it is an impressive building. And there we are, the family pew. We'll just go over here so get a good view of the family pew. It does have a door which is open, which has the Staunton arms on it, and that of course is the pew that you want to be very careful you don't sit in on a Sunday morning, and certainly back in the day you did. But there we are. And these supports of course are for other oil lamps to light the building. So that, the inside here at Staunton in the Vale. So look at the outside before it gets completely black out there. And so as the sun sets over beautiful Staunton in the Vale, here we are by the West End. Although of course it is restored in the 19th century, it is not a rebuild as such. The aim is to retain the appearance of the building, the tower of course, and indeed the St Lawrence choir, as it's known, the North Aisle, are medieval and form, shape, just a window's been tweaked a bit. So look on the outside. And so we'll do south, then round the east end, and then back. And what a nice big porch. And obviously there is the path from the hall, which is very important. So there's access from the village and from the big house. And there we are. That's the chancel. A lot is going to be refacing because the local stone is relatively soft. You can see there's the hall. So the local stone's relatively soft, so you need to reface it every so often. And there we have it. You can see, in fact, that the lower part of the tower is rendered, which probably is what the original building would have been. And then you take off the render, and it weathers quite significantly, shall we say. And around there's vestry here on the north side, as vestries normally are. Very useful. Tower, and here we've got, as at Thorpe, those buttresses in ashlar stone, and the rest is your not so good stone, which you render to make it look like ashlar stone, because everyone, even medieval architects, have a budget. Tower base door there, and a bit more here, so you see the pinnacles here, and yes, it's because it's been refaced, but again, otherwise it would have been rendered originally. And there's the north door, goes straight into the St Lawrence aisle. So back around the west end, because it's an interesting offset tower, which is unusual, particularly on the north side like that. It's not unique. You could find almost any permutation, but it is unusual. And the west end here with these buttresses with pinnacles on top. You can see their pinnacles have these dragons and things on them, which are grotesques, not gargoyles, because they don't gurgle. So the question, is it a gargoyle or a grotesque? Does it gurgle? If it gurgles, it's a gargoyle, because the word gargoyle is derived from the word gurgle. So there we have it, more or less. And so there we have it, as the light fades, as the evening begins to turn to night. Well, as the evening comes, because it's December, so it's only about 4 o'clock. Staunton in the Vale, St Mary. So thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.